see, turn on our Zoom and everything for everyone who's here.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah, hey.
Oh, that's what you meant. Okay, that's what I was like.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia. I'm one of the academic advisors for undergrads in anthropology. I wanted to welcome you all to our first career event today. So thank you guys for coming. I think I'm going to go ahead and maybe make this the, how do we do it? Pin this. Perfect. So then maybe you guys aren't dark. There we go. Cool. So whether you're on Zoom or in person, thank you guys for coming. It's super exciting. I want to welcome our guest speakers and thank them so much for coming. It's a really exciting time to finally be in person with everyone and see real humans that are above the neck and actually have bodies, right? Okay, cool. So just a few quick things. If you are on Zoom, we are going to have a Q&A portion at the end. So please keep your mics muted just because it will be very loud in here. We will let you know though when the Q&A portion starts. Our guest speakers are going to talk each for a bit and then we will open up to Q&A at the end. So just save any questions you have till then. I also want to promote the Anthro Club while we're here. So if any of you are interested in anthropology, you do not have to be an anthro major or minor. It's a really cool little club to be part of. We have all the info on our website. If you're interested, Jasmine's also here. Jasmine, if you can raise your hand. Jasmine can talk to you guys about the club later if you're interested. And if any of you are interested in the honors thesis program during your last year, I did want to let you know that Professor Saiba Varma and I are going to be doing a workshop about the honors thesis program. Probably in about May is the plan. I will be emailing you guys about it. So just as a heads up, if you're interested, we will be talking more about the program toward May for those who would be starting it next year. Yeah, so without further ado, we will begin. So I wanted to go ahead and introduce our guest speakers. We'll start from Gabby. If you want to just introduce yourself down the line, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Hi, I'm Gabby Huff. I'm actually a first year PhD student here right now. I'm some of your TAs. Yeah,
that's totally good. That's perfect.
That's me.
I'm Lau Farnas. I was anthropology in 1999. I graduated. I now work at a venture capital firm designing biotech companies.
I graduated anthropology in 2009, and I'm a physician assistant. I work in cardiology at UCSD.
And I'm Cody Pedersen. I think I was class of 2011 I did a PhD here in sociocultural anthropology. I'm now a senior advisor for education and environmental policy at the County of San Diego, and I also lecture here in the anthropology.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Okay, cool. So with each of them, they're going to just talk a bit about their experience with anthropology, how they use it in their career today, kind of how they got down their path. So each of them are going to talk for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll go down the line and open up to Q&As. So Gabby, if you want to start, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Okay, so mine's a bit different in that I won't be demonstrating like how I use it in my career because my career is grad student right now. So it feels pretty straightforward. So again, hi, hello, I'm Gabby Huff. I'm a first year PhD student in the psychological anthropology here at UCSD. And I'll begin by sharing a little bit of my experiences with graduate school. I got a bachelor's degree in general psychology, took a year off, and started a master's degree in sociocultural anthropology. A year into that, I applied to PhD programs, which is kind of what landed me here. And for me, getting a master's in anthropology was kind of like a core part of me and my journey and figuring out like, do I even think I can do a PhD? Do I even want this? And I like to be transparent about this because some people just go straight from an undergraduate degree into a PhD, which is fantastic, but that wasn't feasible for me as someone who had no idea what anthropology was when I got my bachelor's. And something that was great about my master's program was that it provided me as like, it was kind of like a trial run. And it gave me great opportunities to kind of build mentorship networks and I'll spend the next little bit talking about mentorship networks because I think they're super, super important to helping you be successful in graduate school and also to even get to graduate school. So I owe a lot of my success to the fantastic mentors I had during my undergrad years as well as during my master's. They knew me, they knew my interests and my plans for the future well enough to give me fantastic guidance. When I applied to my master's program, the process was a lot more self-guided, and if you can learn from my mistakes, it's terrifying if you're trying to do it by yourself. And so I really, and the second instance, I was applying to graduate school, went a lot smoother because I had mentors to answer my questions about like what the process of applying to graduate school looked like, to make recommendations about the types of programs I might be interested in looking into. They also gave me like something as simple as giving pep talks, and also provided like much needed feedback on writing samples, also among the other normal things of like writing letters of recommendation. And I know it might seem a little bit like strange to give like that detailed of an account of like the type of mentorship that I received from these individuals, but I feel like it's really important to kind of be transparent to about the amount of support and guidance that I received through the application process, to both show that A, I did not do this alone, this was not a sole effort, draw on all the like mentorship that you possibly can, and also B, to provide an example of the type of mentorship that you can and should not feel ashamed to ask for. Because me being new to applying to the grad school process, I was like, oh, I feel stupid for not knowing the answers to these questions, but you don't need to feel stupid. Ask the questions that you need to ask. Get the information you need to get so you can apply, if that is what you choose. And I realize that a lot of you are undergrads, maybe all of you. I don't see any familiar faces from the grad program here. And so you're in a different position. But if you are interested in grad school, I do highly, highly, highly recommend trying to build those like networks of mentorship and to strengthen the connections that you do already have with different individuals. Like it can be professors who can provide guidance or mentorship and like help guide you with deciding to apply to grad school or guide you throughout the application process. And what these efforts of building these relationships can look like, it can be like talking to a favorite professor. It can also involve reaching out to the chair of undergraduate studies, to Saiba Varma, and to ask these individuals like any questions that you might have that might help clarify the process. A lot of the times these professors, they're more than willing to help out because again, this is like hidden information that, I mean, most professors are nice people. You'll be able to gauge which people are nice enough to like offer this guidance. And also another avenue you could seek out mentorship is from graduate students in anthropology. I know this one seems weird, but we can be a great resource because we've been through the application process very recently, potentially more recently than your like person you're reaching out to who went to like Emory University 20 years ago. And with that, like depending on how recently we applied, we can comment on what the application process currently looks like or what it did when we applied X amount of years ago. But I also want to be clear that like these graduate student mentors, of course, they should be supplementary to those professors and faculty that you're reaching out to, since faculty will be the ones writing your letters of recommendation. And if I have not already kind of like hammered this in so far, ask for help from those who have been through the process is a really helpful tip that seems very straightforward. I did not realize it. If you know people who have applied to your particular program or school, ask them about it. They'll probably be like, hey, do you want to get a coffee? And just like chat with them, or you can do a Zoom call. We live in the land of Zoom right now. And just because this knowledge it was very empowering for me to be able to kind of talk to these people. So moving into the topic of how did I pick schools? Because this is a very, very daunting process. There are a lot of schools out there. This kind of began for me with researching the type of programs I was interested in. So the first time around, I was interested in master's programs in cultural psychology and also other related social science fields. And so literally it would be, you can do a preliminary search of like master's anthropology programs, or you can reach out to other people who are aware of these programs, or something like PhD medical anthropology programs. Also, if you need a list of programs that may be useful, I have a list, like a running list from when I applied. And once I found these programs, I looked at the list of faculty to see if they'd be a good fit for me, based on like the work that they're doing, based on their interests, based on where they say that they're working on right now, where they say they're going. I also paid attention to, like, this is where reading a lot about like whatever field you want to go into is really important. You can pay attention to the types of like scholars whose work that you like, and also you can see where they're working at, and that can be like, oh, I need to apply to this university. And so for this reason, like I applied to Case Western Reserve University because there's a really fantastic anthropology scholar who works in my particular region. And just kind of making those decisions based on like the faculty you'll be working with are kind of the core thing you should be zeroing in on. So yeah, it's about who you'll be working with, and also to bring it to a more shallow note, you can choose schools based on where you would like to live. Just being completely like transparent, like University of Arizona has a fantastic anthropology program. I do not want to live in Tucson, Arizona. And I know that's just my particular preference. My sister lives there. I just don't enjoy the landscape. But so I did not apply. And even though in the moment, like I would have conversations with my advisor and I would feel this pressure to like want to go there because she went there and because of the amazing program. But she was just like, you don't have to apply anywhere you don't want to go. So be realistic with those things of like, where do I want to live as well? Also, this is just kind of normal. Not every school accepts every single year. So keep note of those who are accepting applications when you want to apply. This can make it stressful because it means you have to like time things differently. But yeah, I think like during the pandemic, things have been weird. Harvard didn't, their medical anthropology didn't accept last year. But yeah, also another thing that can help you pick schools are like funding. Not to like, we can go more into conversations about funding later, but some will say that you should only choose schools or apply to schools that you will be fully funded at. And it just depends on how you, what is important to you, what isn't important to you. Kind of moving on, with like reaching out to the schools you're interested in attending. I've already emphasized this enough so far, but like your potential advisor is really, really important. It is really important you get in contact with the professors you're interested in working with. It can be something like, hey, this is Gabby Huff. I'm a current graduate student at wherever you're at. Never mind, I'm not gonna go into the details of an email. If you need that, I can give you like screenshots of the types of emails that I sent. I work really well with like basing my emails off of other things, so that'd be helpful. But you want to be persistent when you're reaching out via email. You want to reach out early. You want to reach out and follow up with those emails. And I know that sounds like you're being really annoying, but it shows that you're taking initiative. It also keeps them from forgetting you. And it kind of, if you make your name stick out, if you've already chatted with them beforehand, they'll be more likely to vouch for you if they do think you're a good fit. Also, with talking to advisors, I highly recommend like doing either a video chat or meeting with them in person if you're interested in working with them. And you should, in those meetings, you should really feel out which ones you could see yourself working with, and you should ask those difficult questions about the type of mentor support that they offer. This can kind of give you an idea of what you can expect as their student. And you can also ask them like, hey, do you think this particular program is a good fit for me? Do you think the culture of the program is a good fit for me? And again, during these interactions, you should also ask about funding because like you gotta live, it's an 8 to 10 year program sometimes, and you're gonna have to live on some type of money. Just being really blunt. I also have some other tips if you want to see like what types of questions to prepare if you get into that moment. I'm more than willing to share that. So I guess moving into like other miscellaneous tips, I wish I had more time to talk about like writing samples in general because that's a whole part of the kind of application process. But my main tip is that you get others to read your writing and others to help you decide which writing of yours best, like puts your best foot forward and showcases your interests and your writing strength. And for me, this looked like having my mentors, the people on my master's thesis committee, edit my writing. But like what is really fantastic about UCSD is you can do that. You can also go to the writing center and there's other people who are literally trained to give feedback on writing. Also another kind of good tip that somebody in my cohort was like, I wish I had known to talk to people who were already in the program, like just kind of ask an idea about the culture of the department. Because you will be spending, if you do a PhD, it can be 5 to 10 years. It's a really long time. And if you're miserable in the culture of that department, you will be miserable the entire time. And again, that just is something that can be figured out based on like the decisions you're making, picking which schools. And I guess with that, it's about the fit. It's about how good of a fit are you. If you get rejected, don't take it personally. It's not any comment on like how good or bad of a student you are. It's not you being smart enough. It's not about you being capable or being like them being like, oh no, they don't have a chance of being successful in this program. They're like, no, it may just be that you're not a perfect fit. You are a less perfect fit than somebody else at that particular moment in time, but that ebbs and flows. And so in my head, or sorry, I used to get in my head about like, oh, I'm not good enough for grad school. But just try. If this is something that you do want, just try. And if you don't want, if you like do get accepted or if you don't get accepted, you can cross that bridge of deciding whether you want to actually do it at that point. But at least like put those effort forward. But yeah, I'm more than willing to like pass along any resources that were really helpful when I was applying. And also just to like be a sounding board if you want to just like vent about not knowing what you want to do with life. Because spoiler alert, I also don't. But yeah, that's my spiel.
Yeah, I mean, those are a lot of really good points, Gabby. I think that mentorship is super important. I think I have gone through life being constantly overwhelmed by the amount of stuff I don't know. And I think that's a pretty normal experience. I started at UCSD in '95, back when it cost $4,500 a year to go here. I lived at home. I didn't know that many people, but I had a job and I was able to pay my way through it. I started as an engineering student and then found out that those were not my people. Had kind of a rough start. I then went to biochemistry and cell biology in the Department of Biology. I thought these are more my people, but they're not totally my people. So I also picked up a second major in anthropology and did anthropology at that time. I did biochemistry and anthropology and had a really good time and found a very happy balance for myself between those two things. I graduated in '99. And then I did a one-year master's degree program in biology through the Department of Biology, where I worked in a lab at the Scripps Research Institute, and graduated from that, and then stayed on in that lab for a year as a technician. I wanted adventure at that time, so I joined Peace Corps, and I went to East Africa. I went to Tanzania. A 50% Muslim country, and we were scheduled to leave on September 14th, 2001. So we were scheduled to leave 3 days after 9/11. So we got delayed, and we were trying to figure out like, what are we going to do? Ended up going a month later, and went to East Africa. And was there all throughout the Iraq invasion and everything else. I taught physics at a high school and did HIV education in the community, kind of trying to learn about public health, trying to figure out if public health was something that I wanted to do. And I decided that public health is really hard. Like trying to get people to do behavior change is really, really hard. So I wanted to go back into biomedical science. So I applied to medical sciences training programs, MD, PhD programs, because the NIH funds those. I applied from the bar in a casino because it was the only place that had internet. So I sat at the bar and applied to medical school. And I got into a couple places, but wanted to come back to San Diego. So I came back to the medical school here in San Diego. This is where I grew up. I did the first years of the way that an MD PhD program works is you do the first years of medical school, then you do your PhD, then you do the last years of medical school. So I did the first years of medical school, and then because during my master's degree I'd been stuck in a windowless room all the time, I wanted to do something that had field work in it. So I looked everywhere through UCSD, and I found Professor Bill Fennical down at Scripps Oceanography, who does deep sea drug discovery with marine microorganisms. And I said, I can be an oceanography graduate student. That's fine. So I went down to talk to him, and we got along great. And we talked, and then he sent me an email and said, you know, it was great to talk to you, but I don't think that doing medicine and doing oceanography is a good career fit for you. I don't think that's going to work in the long term. I can't really see you running an organic chemistry lab and doing medicine. So I don't know that it'll fit. And I was really disappointed. So I had a couple of glasses of wine, and I wrote him a long email about how I really appreciated his thoughts, but he was wrong. He was wrong for these reasons. And it would be great for me to come and be his graduate student. And then I didn't hear anything for a month. And I was like, oh shit, that didn't work. But then then I was getting ready to look for other labs, and he sent me an email, and he said, oh, maybe you have something there. Come down, let's have lunch and talk again. And so I ended up joining his lab and had the wonderful grad school experience of my PhD advisor talking shit to me while we sailed across the Gulf Stream on a ship that I couldn't cut straight with a bandsaw while we were trying to make instruments to do deep sea ocean sampling, which was fun. So then I finished my PhD at Scripps and went back, finished the last years of medical school. And then again, wanted to stay in San Diego. Found out that I have a tendency to be a cynic in terms of people. So I went into pediatrics because you can't really be a cynic towards sick kids. So I did pediatrics at Rady Children's Hospital. And then I went on to do a fellowship in pediatric hematology oncology and pediatric infectious disease. And while I was doing that combined fellowship, the way that a fellowship works is that you do some clinical time and then you have research time. And so I started my research work thinking, well, I'm doing oncology and infectious disease, I should do microbiome work. So I started in a microbiome lab. And I got 3 months into working in the lab, and I said, I hate this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to get NIH grants, trying to keep a lab afloat. I can't see this. And then I had another one of these sort of crises of purpose. What am I going to do? What am I going to do here? So at the Children's Hospital at that time, they were setting up an institute for genomic medicine. So I went over and talked to Stephen Kingsmore, who was the CEO of the Institute. And I said, I want to come be your fellow. And he said, we don't have fellows. And I said, yeah, but you don't need to pay me. And he said, come be a fellow. So I went over and worked for him and ended up doing a lot of health economic work. So a rapid whole genome sequence. So we were turning around a whole genome sequence on a critically ill patient in about 36 hours, which was unheard of at the time. But it was really expensive to do that. So we had to do a bunch of work to basically prove that this is worth doing. This is something that you can do, and we need to do it without insurance authorization. So I spent a lot of time working on sort of that health economics outcome research. And then when I graduated from my fellowship, I got a job as the assistant medical director of the Institute and continued to do that work, but also branched into using sequencing to look at infectious disease. So how can we diagnose infectious disease from sequencing? And then ended up going from there to a company where I was the head of medical and scientific affairs at an infectious disease diagnostics company. And I was very happy there until I got a message on LinkedIn, and it was a guy who said, I want to talk to you about a job. He said, I have a job. I don't need to talk to you about a job. He said, come on, talk to us about a job. Okay, so I talked to them about a job, and the job was with this firm that's called Flagship Pioneering, which is out of Boston. And that's the firm that made Moderna. So it's a company that basically, they don't invest in companies like most venture capital companies. They build them from the ground up, therapeutic and agriculture companies. And so they said, look, we have 70 different companies right now, but they each have to focus on one specific thing, like Moderna makes vaccines. But their technology, their mRNA, could maybe be used for a lot of other stuff than just doing vaccines. So what we're doing is we're putting together a team of people that looks at all the tech across all of our companies and figures out which tech can be put together in a new way to solve some big unmet need in medicine. We have $3 billion cash on hand that you can use to make these new companies. You should come do this. And I'm like, okay, I'll come do that. And the reason that I got the job, so this is the point, like that was the path that I took through, and there's a couple of takeaways from this. One, it was completely unplanned. Like when I was going through and they interviewed me for this last job, they're like, why did you take this career path? Like, poor planning? Like, I don't know. Like I just sort of followed what was interesting. But each place that I went through in my career had a unique and different culture. Each place had a very different way that it worked and the way that the people interacted. And training in anthropology, I think, really helped you to sort of think about the culture, look at it, and figure out, how does this culture work? Where do I fit into this culture? And that allowed you to do relatively rapid shifts. The other reason I got this job is because they looked at my resume and said, you're really intellectually flexible. You can do a lot of different things. You've done organic chemistry, you've done oceanography, you've done biology, you've done anthropology, you've done medicine. So we can give you a lot of different problems, and we trust that you'll be able to solve them because you're not overly focused on just one thing. Most advances in science and human endeavors in general comes when you take something that is readily understood in one field and apply it to a different field. And people say, like, isn't that amazing that you came up with that idea? And it's like, it's actually not my idea. It's well known in nanotech. We just took it from nanotech and applied it to therapeutics. And so I think that ability to figure out how you can shift ideas from one place to another and having the intellectual flexibility to do that is super important to be successful. And I think, like Gabby said, I had a lot of setbacks. I mean, I've done well in my life. I've had failed classes. I've had bad GPAs. I've had rejections from programs. Like, all those things are part of normal human existence, and some of you may know exactly where you're going and your path is going to be straight and narrow to get there. And I commend you on having that focus. Most of you don't, and that's okay. Like, that's fine. Like, you figure it out as you go along, and you have the intellectual flexibility to figure out how to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you.
So thank you so much.
So I'm Jeannie Nassar, and I'm a physician assistant in cardiology, but I also went in undergrad and majored in anthropology. But I didn't start out with that. I started out more with earth sciences, and then transferred over to ecology and evolution. I don't know if they still have that major.
Yeah.
I really loved it, but I also found it very depressing. So I actually, going back even further, when I was young, a lot of my family members were in medicine. Even one of my great grandmas was a midwife. So I've always seen that part of it and knew I wanted to go down that path, but I never felt like I fit in the science world in some ways. I mean, I love biology, but I never applied myself to physics very much, and I'm not very good at math. I had to take pre-algebra 3 times. So if we're talking about like a pathway, so those types of things. And I took anthropology on kind of just, I kind of know what it is, Indiana Jones, whatever. And I loved it so much, and I realized that, oh my gosh, I do love this. And kind of the realization, because my family's also very working class, so it's always, you go to school to do something you're going to make a living at. You don't go to school and major in philosophy, because what are you going to do with a philosophy degree and $100,000 of debt? And I'm just being a realist here with that. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. If that's your dream, I do believe in working hard and following your dream. That's just how I was kind of drilled into. So what do you mean you're going to major in anthropology, But I just loved it so much. I thought, I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to work a little extra hard and also take the science classes that I need. I have friends that didn't see me for 3 years. I used to like be in a band and hang out and all these things. And yeah, that all went away when I got here. And for example, I don't know if this is still true, but I was like 28, went with my cousin to a party. He had gone to San Diego State. And they're like, we're gonna play beer pong. And I was like, I don't know how to play that. And my cousin's like, yeah, you went to UCSD. So anyway, but and the thing I loved about this department, I mean, the professors were approachable and amazing people. And obviously it's been a long time since I've connected with the department, but I remember a professor, Dr. D'Andrade, and he was amazing. And he used to make us do these projects and it just like blew my mind. I was like, I can't believe I'm actually here learning this, and it's so cheap at the time too, with these world-renowned people. I think that's part of being in San Diego, is you get all these world-renowned people that are so approachable. So utilize that and don't be intimidated. I remember I went to his office because I'd done badly on something, and I was crying, like I'm a failure, I'm never gonna get through this. And he's like, he looks at it, he's like, no, you did fine, you did really well. Like, and he, it was just one of those things. And so, I mean, I literally was ready to drop out until I went to him, this very important, world-renowned, like anthropologist, and he helped me through. And same thing, Dr. Jordan, so just remember that they are here to help you, and I think they do want everyone to succeed. And I know this campus, it is a huge campus, and there's so many of us, but I feel like the anthropology department is just a very supportive department in general. So, and sorry, I'm a little all over the place, but my point is, if you love it, don't think that you don't have a path to like a career where you can support yourself and you can make money. So just knowing I wanted to do medicine, and I had a kid when I was kind of younger, and I was like, this physician assistant thing sounds pretty good, and I think I can do pretty well with this. So I'm like, it's still medicine, it still follows the medical model, and I can do something I enjoy. So I did that pathway, went to graduate program for that, and I'm very happy with that decision. And I definitely utilize my anthropology all the time. I think that in the medical community, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or advanced practice provider, there's all different ways that people look at a patient. And I'm happy that I have this background, because I feel like there's times I have a different approach or a different spin on approaching or interacting with those patients that makes them more comfortable. And I'm not saying anybody else makes them uncomfortable, but I think it's dual things, right? So like having an anthropology background and that training, and then also being a physician assistant, we do get to spend a lot more time with the patients than the doctors do. So that's like multifactorial, I guess. And it's also definitely that's something that makes you stand out if you do end up choosing a different career path or graduate school. People look at anthropology and they do think Indiana Jones, like, that's really cool that you did that, like, how did you do that? What did you do? Did you, and then one other thing, I don't want to, two more things. If you guys have the opportunity to do any digs, definitely do that, because I did that and it was the best experience of my life. One of the best experiences, but it's way up there. And then two, if you guys have any questions at any point and want to contact me, if you're interested in learning about physician assistant, I know for UCSD is planning on starting a program, a master's program soon, I hope. So anyway, please feel free to contact me. Thanks so much.
All right, those were very good. I'm Cody Patterson again. I guess I'll start briefly in the beginning. I was brought home from University Hospital. Now I'm a little stiff. I just 4 weeks ago I had emergency spinal surgery for a spinal tumor. Good, it's benign, but I'm not usually. I have resting jerk like face, but I'm more like that now. I'm very stiff, but I think I'm relatively loose. So I was brought home from University Hospital, now UCS Hillcrest, to Macy Grad Student Apartments when my dad was a grad student in the Anthropology department. That's not why I'm here. So I was raised for the first several years here. Like the first few years, just this was a different. I mean, I think I'm going to come around to it, but I think it's important to know your nature. And for me, part of my nature is I was raised before Shiley Eye Center, before UTC was just getting built, and before White Village, and it was like frogs and salamanders, lizards, and coyotes, and mountain lions, and that I'm sort of a product of a disappearing frontier, in a certain sense, and that sort of marked that experience marked me. We then moved into the edge of La Jolla. We're actually in the village, and so I'm a product of San Diego Unified. Public schools, and then did my undergraduate at Berkeley in English. And I did a Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing and Poetry at the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. And then I came back here into the PhD. In summers I'd spent doing field work. My dad had a nonprofit doing applied social economic research. And so I already was familiar with doing survey work and field work, and so I came back to the PhD. I did my master's. I'm by nature a very sort of, I grew up on Dungeons and Dragons and indie rock, the Cure and the Smiths. And I'm a strange kid. I don't look necessarily like that, but that's who I am. And so when I came back, I was into sort of, anthropology, kind of obscure. I did my master's thesis on shamanic masking in the Pacific Northwest, and I used the Luzu Batari to analyze it, which is like as obscure as you can possibly get in a master's thesis. And then I did my dissertation work in Highland, Peru, in Peru Southern Highlands, in Cusco department, in Chubuyucas, which is a sort of 14,000 feet cattle raising frontier, alpaca, and cattle, extensive cattle ranges. Quechua speaking, I spent 3 summers studying Quechua. So like classical anthropology. My dad, having been an anthropologist, said, "You're crazy, you should go to the South Pacific, where it's actually fun to live." And so I studied ethnic conflict, land use. It was an interesting province in that it had been controlled Peru is a crazy place. And at the time, we were just like in part of a particular craziness. It had been till 1980, the literates couldn't, if you were illiterate, you couldn't vote until 1980. So in 1969, there was a left-wing military dictatorship, and then that came until 1980. There had been a very comprehensive land reform in Highland Peru, or in Peru, the largest land reform in Latin America. And then, strangely, you had a return to democracy. You had illiterate folks could finally vote, so the indigenous vote went from being essentially zero, because mestizos were the only literate folk in the countryside. So the mestizos had, or vecinos as they called themselves, had 100% of the vote and only 10% of the population. And then in that election, it went to suddenly the 90% indigenous communities suddenly had 9% of the vote. And the Shining Path started its uprising. So you had the return to democracy, you had the end of a major land reform, you had Shining Path. So I came in must have been 2000. So it had already been happening, but in the context of this transition, I was really excited about the opportunity to study what had really happened all over Europe, which is the transition from feudalism to sort of classical market democracy and agrarian reform and political democracy. And it was exciting to actually kind of be there talking to the people who've been through it, and we're still going through it. And I particularly focused on, obviously I worked in indigenous communities, I'd taken Quechua, I knew Quechua, but I particularly worked with the sort of declining landowning elites, because it was exciting to me to actually study how these folks were adapting to this major loss of power, how they psychologically did it, how they economically did it. Long story short, one of the things they did is they co-terminus with a lot of these reforms was a push to have actual quality education. And but when you went to the countryside, the only people who at the time had a basic education from teachers were mestizos. So the mestizos moved into a position of kind of cultural authority. They had a lot of the old, they could play the classical, the traditional musical instruments, they knew the old songs. So they become they moved into a cultural dominance and an educational dominance. So they reproduced a lot of the old ways. Now that's transitioning as indigenous people increasingly get that cultural capital. So I haven't been that back in several years. So I did a classical like ethnography. Returned home, my PhD, came back. As I said, my father's been an anthropologist. He had a nonprofit social science research firm. I then took over the nonprofit side of that. We did socioeconomic impact studies, a lot of fisheries management work, particularly in the South Pacific and Alaska. I did a lot of work in Alaska and the Gulf Coast. We did impact studies on, he'd already done impact studies on Exxon Valdez, so we did oil impact studies for Minerals Management Service. So yeah, I was doing that, everything was fine, family, and then I got really sort of activated in 2016 around sort of Bernie Sanders, progressive movement stuff. Once the Democrats lost that election, I was like, fuck this, we're taking over. And I helped organize slates that basically took over the grassroots side of the Democratic Party here. I became much more involved in electoral politics and then became involved in environmental policy. Eventually joined the executive committee of the San Diego Sierra Club. I was media past president of the Democrats for Environmental Action. I was a state executive board member for the party and county central committee member. And so I moved into politics, I moved into environmental policy, I moved into education policy, and I had a reappraisal of what it had been to be an anthropologist, which is like you go out to the periphery. I mean, I was at the edge of the global capitalist system. And I really, in a certain sense, had a certain amount of guilt. I've used my privilege. I clearly, I am like a tall, white, affluent male. And I didn't intend to necessarily, but I used that privilege to gain really extraordinary access to people's lives. I mean, I went to a village where, imagine going to like, showing up here and be like, yeah, can I just live in your house? Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Can I hang out with the mayor? Yeah, come meet the mayor, hang out with the mayor. Like, within weeks, I'm compadre, I'm doing haircutting ceremonies. And so you're using an extraordinary amount of privilege and leveraging that to get information. Great information. It got me a PhD, and I think I was able to have a very positive impact on that. I produced some knowledge, but one of the things I did not produce was knowledge that was, if somebody was a policymaker, they would have had to traverse an extraordinary amount of impediments to get to whatever information I had buried in my dissertation that was needed. So I had a lot of guilt, not only about the privilege I used to produce that knowledge, but about the fact that I had, in my career, I had not really engaged in the, we come from the metropolis. We are at the center of the global capitalist system. Things that happen here determine what happens with climate action around the world, particularly with relation to climate action. I was very concerned about the fact that my academic career had not led to my active engagement in changing the world and in alignment with my values. So I got involved in politics. I am now a senior policy advisor and a manager of governmental affairs for a county supervisor. We're doing climate action planning and a regional decarbonization framework. And what I'll say about that, and then I came back and I proposed Nancy Postero, who was my dissertation chair and who was a good friend. I was in her first class here in East 15 years ago. I said, hey, I have all this knowledge about how our actual political system works, how decisions are being made, environmental decisions, police reform decisions, all these things. And we're sending grad students out to the middle of nowhere. It's all happening right here. It's visible. People want to talk about it. We have a Brown Act. You can do a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. You can get all the information you can know. We can learn, and we can produce what I think of in terms of what Raj said. You can produce translational social science research, which is research that is readily applicable to the struggles of real people are engaging in to change the in the country. So I then came to Nancy and I pitched this class, Politics for Environmental Change, where we would bring in Congress people and assembly members and social movement activists, environmental activists, climate activists, environmental justice advocates. And we would start talking to students about how things actually work, why we're not getting, what the true impediments to collective action. So I think, let me just say, step back here. and take up in my remaining time, take a sort of meta view of what I just said and the lessons I learned and lessons that I think may be applicable to your experience. I'd say the fundamental thing as you move forward is to understand your own nature. You're proposing to go on a journey, and if you don't understand the vessel you're traveling in and the kinds of destinations that you would like to arrive at, it's not going to be useful. We can come up here and talk about what we did, and we can even post solutions for you. But if you don't have a very clear idea, and your nature, by nature, I mean, it's partially genetic, it's partially epigenetic. I mean, your siblings are particular ways, and your parents are particular ways. There is a genetic component to our nature, there's no question. There's epigenetic elements to our nature. It is, neonatal nutrition, it's early family environment, it's socioeconomics, it's demographics, it's the society in which you live in, the context, it's the geopolitical context in which you find yourself. I emerge in a particular geopolitical context, in a particular place in the class system, and that's governed the kinds of things that I want to do with my life, and the kinds of ways I want to engage in life. So number one, know your nature. Spend a lot of time trying to think about it. Try to disambiguate it from all what your parents say you should do, and what your friends say you should do, and what the TV says you should do. Know your nature, because if you pursue a life that's not consistent with your nature, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And I'm not saying that as somebody who knew the whole time. Number two, I can say, because you're in this room, your natures are going to be way out on the bell curve. That's just how it is, man. All of you have gone through life and you've been like, I don't like buffalo wings, I don't like sports bars, or whatever it is. It's because the world is made for 2 standard deviations from the head of that bell curve, and you happen to not be there. So as you go through life, you have to be prepared to carve a path, and all these people have carved very particular paths that is appropriate for you as someone who happens to be out there, an outlier on the bell curve in a world that's not necessarily made for you. That's just the nature. It's a statistical quality. And you're in this room, you're taking anthropology. If you've gone into molecular biology, you're much more likelihood that you're somebody who by nature is comfortable with a clear path. You're a rook on the chessboard, or you probably have friends around, they're going to be an investment banker. Awesome, straight path, go be an investment banker. I'm going to be a doctor, great, awesome. You're an anthropologist, Jesus. So I know ahead of time that your people that move across that chessboard more like a knight, or whatever Lausch just described. It's like, that's the strangest path ever. I don't know what piece that is, but you take strange paths, and you have to know that about yourself. And what I would say finally in regard to in understanding that nature, understanding the context, you live in a particular geopolitical moment. Look where we are. We're at the 7th floor of some palace. Where did the money come from? What's the nature of this economy? Open San Diego Business Journal. It's not, the world is not here to fund anthropologists. I'm a lecturer. I'm a part of UCAFT 1474. We meet, the average salary for a lecturer in the UC system is $19,000 a year. And we live on top of an economy that's just booming. A real estate economy is booming. Property values went up 29% last year in San Diego, 29% last year. However, if you have a wage, maybe your wages are up at 5.5% or something. Well, property's up 29%. So you're in a global geopolitical context in which anthropology is at the backwaters of that. So you have to think as you work your way through. It's a very complex environment to be an actual academic. There's not a lot of tenure track positions out there, and it's not going to get better, honestly. That's just not where our society is moving. Number two, as you navigate, what I will say, the good news is an anthropology degree gives you an enormous strength, and that it teaches you to think, as several people have pointed out, about the nature of the society in which you live. I go into institutions, I was nobody. 5 years ago, I had no connections. If I pick up the phone, I'll call 4 congressmen I have on my phone. I'll call them right away, they'll pick up. How is that possible? Part of that is because of anthropology. Part of that is because when I go into a room, I think, okay, what are the socioeconomics of each of these people? What are their natures? Look into their eyes. I started thinking, are they nervous? What's going on? To think about human beings at their basic root, to think about social institutions at their root. Where is the power distributed? As my dad said, I would come in with all these crazy theories, and be like, follow the bouncing dollar. That's what he used to say, follow the bouncing dollar. And he was right to a certain extent. He's got his own weaknesses, but in terms of like, that's too general, but as an anthropologist, you walk into space, into social institutions, and you understand their material. And that is an enormous strength, and you can use it in any discipline. I ended up right now doing lecturing, but also doing policy work and electoral work. I'm also running for school board. That's another story. But all these people, well, one is still in the making. She may or may not stay on the true path toward an academic career. But we'll see. But the rest of us have taken strange paths, and anthropology has prepared us in really incredible ways to take that path where we are. In fact, in this room means that we by nature of what. So that's the luck. All in there.
Great. So we're going to open up to some Q&As. If you're on the Zoom chat, go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat. We will monitor them and then we'll go ahead and read them out loud shortly. But in person, people, do we have any questions that you wanted to start off with? Whether that's for everyone or specifically for an individual.
Yeah, I had one for all of you because you mentioned the LinkedIn thing. So I just wanted to like ask like what role LinkedIn played in your career or so, because like now I'm thinking I need to get my LinkedIn game up because like I just got approached for that. I was like, oh shoot, maybe I should update my profile. But yeah.
So for me, I can start. Like LinkedIn is the only social media I do. And it's been enormously important. It's been enormously important for me if you're trying to present a unique skill set in terms of people finding. I mean, my current job is because they found me on LinkedIn. Like that was how they found me. So in person, most of the really good jobs that you'll ever get in your life are not posted. Most of the really good jobs that are out there are that they need something specific and they find you or somebody knows somebody. And having a really wide network and always keeping it professional is really, at least for me, has been very important. That's been my experience. And I also have the added burden of I have no anonymity. I'm literally the only person in the world with so there's no anonymity for me. So I take the online stuff extra seriously because everything comes back to you, and I can't be like, oh, it's that other Lagofarnas. It wasn't me. It was the other one. Like, so you know, like as other people have said, I'm happy to answer any questions for you. You guys can easily track me down. I'm the only person. But that's been my experience with it. I don't know what your guys' experience has been.
I had it when it first came out, and then I hadn't really used it, and I got rid of it. And then a friend of mine who had gotten, she was a PA as well, and gotten her MBA and started doing all these cool things. She kind of would reach out to me with LinkedIn things, and I went back on, and I realized it is really interesting, and you can connect with people who all different areas, and especially focusing in your area. And I have been approached by different places for all kinds of different jobs, whether it's consulting or another clinical job. So I think it's a good thing to have. I think it's a good resource. And I agree with you. I always think to myself, this is probably the only social media I should have. I don't. I have others. But I think to myself, this is probably the one I should not go with.
I'm so unprofessional. It's like I have Facebook. I use Facebook all the time. You put organizing. Facebook's essential. Somebody's like, "Oh, I'm not on Facebook." I'm like, okay, well, we're done. Because I mean, you just need it. Honestly, it's not. I don't like Facebook per se, but to communicate to people, that's how people communicate. So, but I do think LinkedIn, obviously, if you're more professional.
That's a little hard.
You're fine, because I had gotten rid of my Facebook as well, and there's all these things I want to do or different organizations, and so I'm on Facebook again. It was like hard to get like my third or fourth account of deleting it so many times. But yeah, but it's and like you said, it's a good platform to use.
Yeah. I think again it's a question: what's your intended audience, right? Yeah. Like, and what are you trying to accomplish? And so.
I don't really use LinkedIn all that often. If I'm being quite honest, I have it. It's there. Somebody used it to find me out and to like seek me out as like a mentor because she wants to come to this program that I'm in. But other than that, I don't use it at all. So take that what you will.
Do we have any other questions from anyone in person? Yeah, go ahead.
Anybody got anything archaeological going on that I can work with? Because I'm trying to build my resume and CV, and I need something. If anybody knows or have anything.
So what kind of advice do you guys have for that? Would you say in terms of getting like research going?
Anything.
Try to do a dig somewhere, like Jaime Alway, I don't know if you can like dig with him in Belize, but he runs like I want to say 3 to 4 digs every summer. He's out of NAU though, and I don't know how it works, but I think you should be able to go and dig with him.
The dig I did was here in Jordan.
Yeah, we have quite a
Professor
few.
Levi.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
So that's how I got it. And I was in, so for me, I was in this one unit, like Mayan history class with Dr. Jordan. This is the way, but, and he was talking about Mayan and how much stuff there is undiscovered. And I was like, well, how do you actually do that? You know, I was already an anthropology major and I was like, really didn't have any idea that that could actually be done. So he's like, go talk to Professor Levi. And in that program too, there are students from all over the United States and Canada and Europe too. So if you just look it up, I'm sure you guys.
There's quite a few, and I
Yeah.
think some of you have participated in some of our like study abroads before. So we do have some more short-term ones that will happen during like the winter break. We went to Italy. Those aren't digs necessarily, but they are archaeological research courses. We just did one in Mexico last week, but in the summer we are planning a Peru trip with Professor Goldstein, and then I believe a Mediterranean trip with Professor Braswell. I cannot remember if that is exactly where he was planning on going, but they're tentatively planned. So if you're ever interested in those, please reach out to like Anthro Advising, our email. We would love to talk to you guys about it. They're really unique because most departments don't do their own study abroads. Most departments do not involve those kind of things. So it's very interesting, but really good advice. Yeah, reach out to certain professors. Professor Levy does a ton of really cool research down at Scripps if you're interested in like marine archaeology, as well as Professor Rivera Colazo. You can always reach out to us if you want like specific like opportunities and things like that. Other questions for in person? Anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
So I asked this as someone who is about to graduate and who's not planning to go to grad school as soon as they graduate, but that wants to take some more time, get some certifications. And how do you guys, sorry, this is a question for all of you. How would you say is the best way to keep contact with current professors and current faculty members after you graduate from, from a bachelor's degree? Because I feel like one of my greatest, I guess, fears or anxieties is that, oh no, I'm no longer a student anymore. I don't get all those field schools and all those internships and all those cool little emails and everything that's happening. So how would you go about keeping those contacts, those opportunities while sort of in between undergrad and graduate school?
So everybody always likes to hear that they've done a good job. Even your professors like to hear that they've done a good job. So if you go out into life and you experience something and you send an email to someone and said, this thing that happened to me made me think of your class and the thing that I learned from my class and how that's helpful. I still have lunch with my PhD advisor all the time. Like we get together once a month and talk because he's just a great guy. People love to maintain their contact. People that teach because they like people and they want to have relationships. And I think that reaching out to people, like whether it's someone that you don't know, you're reaching out because I want to do archaeology, or reaching out to someone because you want to maintain a relationship, it's always the right thing to do. The worst thing that happens is that they don't respond. And then it's not a relationship you're going to maintain anyway. So then you haven't lost anything. But I mean, that would be my take on it. Like if you're in doubt about whether or not you should reach out, you should always reach out.
I was just gonna say, just make friends with them. Literally, like the mentor from my undergrad years, I'm still in contact with him today. And like, I still give him like little updates and like, just treat him like a friend if you are able to get to that point. And yeah, I guess reach out like that. You can just bounce out and send an email and be like, hey, like I'm applying to graduate school. It's in a couple of years. And say like, you said you would help walk me through the process. You said you did this. As long as you're keeping up, yeah. Or it can even be in the form of like shooting them a message every couple of months, being like, hey, here's where I am at life, and here's kind of what I'm like doing. Do you have a moment to chat? I really enjoyed our chats when I was a student underneath you. Just like treat them like a human being. Don't treat them like a professor, which is a weird dynamic to undo. I still currently face that with my mentor from my undergrad years.
I would also say, I mean, this is a kind of concept like restorative justice. The core of restorative justice is actually to establish relationships before the disruption of the relationships occur. And I'd say in the same way, maybe this is useful use in the version we've gone through, but I'd say for students that are maybe not quite at that level yet, I would say I would draw on some of what others have said and say the key to maintaining a relationship is having established a relationship. And so this is a strange thing. I'll go through, I just taught a class and I would say like 2 people through the entire class reached out and were like, hey, this reading was awesome. Like, do you have an idea of where, okay, I don't know. I mean, you know, there are probably students that are thinking ahead. They're thinking, oh, I want this person to write the recommendation. I don't really care. They reached out. Those are honestly, those are probably the students I'll remember 2 years from now, the 2 people who just happened to reach out. So I would say, I would reinforce some of what's been said. The best way to maintain a relationship moving forward is to establish a relationship at the time when you have that class. And maybe friendship's probably a little bit, I mean, depending on the age difference of the professor and the context of the thing, friendship may be a little bit much, but establishing a mentor-mentee relationship maybe, and coming back to them and refreshing it. I would also say some very savvy students, in my experience, when I was a grad student, they would get the recommendations right when they were leaving, and they would be generic, but at the very least, when they came back, they had a recommendation. Maybe it was 3 years later, but they'd say, hey, you wrote this recommendation. Oh yeah, I remember you. Well, they have the recommendation. I could just kind of freshen it up, but if they had that recommendation in hand already, it seems awkward, but you know, it works. So.
Cool. I did want to circle back. I forgot to mention this. Our newsletters that we send out every quarter, there are lots of digs and field schools that are posted on that. I know it's a big document to read through, but we do put a lot of resources on there, internships, things like that. We have an internships page on our career pages now on our website. I just want to point that out because there's a lot of field schools and digs that aren't going to be through UCSD, right? They're going to be through outside sources. And we do post a lot of them on our newsletter. So please check it out. It's still in your inbox probably, so you can go back. A lot of them are still like valid because we did just send it out 2 weeks ago. So I did want to touch on that. I know we do have a question for Cody from the Zoom chat. So Cody, the question says, I'm wondering what your opinion is regarding doing your PhD in a foreign country as opposed to in the US. I've been told by a professor who worked in Latin America during their PhD that they felt they were able to bring different perspectives to activism and organizing in Latin America. What's your perspective on this? How were you able to live in Latin America while doing a PhD at UCSD?
It's hard. You know, this is a really hard one. I wrestled with it, obviously. I mean, the core of anthropology, there's a sort of romance to anthropology. It's like part of what draws us into anthropology. And so when somebody's in like, why don't you just do an ethnography of like, you know, your hometown? You're like, what? That's not what I want to do. Like, what do I do with my cool hat? And so, but I do think in terms of the reality is, as an academic, there are a lot, I don't mean to get too political on it, but the truth is there are a lot of working people that are like literally starving, experiencing hunger so that we can have this growth. I joke about it, but they're really, this is a class system, you know, and this system does let in it does let in certain people into the class system, and the university is part of the pathway into that. So it has a meritocratic justification. So it lets some people out of the bottom and into this university system. But by and large, this is a caste system, and it exists to sort of reinforce the privileges and give them the luster of merit. And it articulates the economy and it gives people skills. Well, I'm not like a straight up Marxist thing, but that is a truth. So for me, when I think, wow, there is a lot of people who are really going through a lot of deprivation, and I have an enormous privilege of going out and not producing anything. I'm not making widgets. I'm not, you know, I'm using the microscope. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere writing a dissertation. Very few people are going to read. So there's a certain luxury to doing one of these classical ethnographic things that I came back and I have some guilt about that. So I would say, for me personally, if I had a child who was in anthropology, heaven forbid, I have 2 children. I don't know that they'll do this. They'll do some YouTube thing or nonsense. but if I did, I mean, I would probably say, look, you have one of the privileges you have is to be part of this society that is determining the life outcomes for people all over the world. And those people cannot come here and penetrate this world. You actually have that enormous privilege. Take that privilege. Yes, it's not that romantic to do a dissertation on how city council decisions are actually made, you know, but those are things that actually can affect working people's lives. So honestly, it sucks. You can find your romance in some other way. Probably that's my advice, is to say, you have the power of understanding the society like no one else does. And if you have the tools that anthropology gives you, the theoretical tools and the practical tools and methodological tools, and you can investigate your own society, it's your choice really, but I would say that would be my preferred choice, is to actually have that impact.
I know, sorry, can
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
say,
of
so I
course.
know that was your question, but so I just had like this realization of things. So I grew up in Detroit for some time till I was 10, and then we moved to San Diego, and then I grew up in a city called Newport Beach. And then when I moved back here, I lived like in Hillcrest and Mission Hills, and then the only place I could afford to buy a house was not in those places. And so I looked in neighborhoods, and the neighborhood I found is called Mountain View, and it's off Ocean View Boulevard. And it's probably one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in San Diego, but I've learned so much. And so I guess what I'm going here is, if the person online or any of you are interested in doing something ethnographic, find, and I'm not saying this, I guess I'm not trying to sound condescending or like I'm better than anyone, or, you know, and I love my neighborhood, I love my neighbors, I feel perfectly safe there, I don't have any issues there. We can't walk to the corner store, that is true, and my son can't wear blue or red or khaki, but it's and then maybe I did choose that too because it was affordable, but it was also like I was okay with it, maybe because I was from Detroit, or maybe because I don't know, sorry, it's too much information about it. But anyway, that is like, I think that would be a good example of what an area, just as an example of what to maybe consider.
You guys have any more questions? Anyone in person? I know there's a couple of questions in the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Have any of you ever worked with people that were disabled or had service dogs in anthropology? Because I have a service dog. I'm in anthropology. I'm doing archaeology, so I've already worked it out with the people I'm working with. But for like the future, it's not very friendly to have a service dog. Do you agree, Silas?
Yeah, definitely. Something I've struggled with a lot is like I'm interested more in like biological anthropology and genetics and things like that. So obviously like having a service dog and like, you know, dealing with labs and things like that has been really difficult. So yeah, so I know we've had a lot of conversations about just like the accessibility of, you know, what you want to study. And like, you know, I would like to do more lab work, but it is also like, you know, finding a lab that is willing to work with me and willing to provide accommodations.
So, sorry. So they should be providing those accommodations. I have a son who has needs certain accommodations. So if I had to fight really hard for that. So I've had to fight very, very hard for him to get those accommodations. And you guys, I know it's a rough fight. I haven't worked with someone who's gone through this, but I am sympathetic. And actually, for my clinic in cardiology and Hillcrest, the schedulers know that I do take patients with service dogs, and I'm one of the only ones that will. So literally this lady comes in with 2 giant German shepherds, which is intimidating. I'm not saying it's not, but you know, and you're gonna have dog people and you're gonna have people who aren't dogs. But if that's your ADA and that's what you need, I hope if you just continue to stand up for that people will be more accommodating. And like I said, I am a dog person, so that, you know, someone who's not has a totally different side. But like I allow patients to have their dog with them in the hospital, and you know, we have programs to board them at the Humane Society if they're really sick and then ICU and the community clubs. But I don't know if that answers any of your question, but just from a supportive perspective.
No, I just maybe 2 months ago connected Professor Lana Silberg communication with a gentleman named Roberto Milan, who is a longtime disability advocate and organizer and policy expert. He's disabled himself, and he is now a senior advisor for Supervisor Nora Vargas in District 1. So I connected her. He came in and just spoke in her class. But if you're interested in getting connected to the larger community that's working on organizing around disability issues in San Diego, I can help facilitate that.
That'd be great.
I mean, when I was in grad school, I lived in Mesa before they generally allowed dogs, and we had a great day. So I took the dog to lab with me, and my PI was fine with that, and the dog stayed in the office, couldn't go into the actual lab, but there was an office where the dog could be. I think there's a lot of people that are actually pretty accommodating. I think you just have to like, I wouldn't let that stop.
Is there any other questions? I think this one might be more geared toward Cody and then Gabby, maybe with some of your plans in the future. Let's see. So the student said, I'm also curious, what skills do you bring to working with tribes or advocating for those people's rights? How do you use your skills to help advance their interests? I think Cody, that might be a little more geared toward you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do what's called Indigenous Affairs for our office. We actually just established an office of Indigenous Affairs. San Diego County has more Indigenous communities and more Indigenous jurisdictions than any community in the United States. With what's history behind that. They're fairly small. Me, I we're a band society, so they're fairly small villages and communities. We actually do. You really, honestly, have to be very proactive about engaging with Indigenous communities, particularly in San Diego. One of the things that happened as part of the settlement process is Anglos before them, Spanish colonials, took really a lot of and enclosed a lot of the good land and ran cattle on a lot of the best land. Obviously, Indigenous communities were transhuman. They moved across seasonally across the landscape. And so they ended up being displaced to the mountain portions of their traditional range in which they lived. And so a lot of our tribes are in the mountains. And then when at the end of the 19th century, when 11 bands were given lands, they were given lands in those foothills in Cuyamaca, in Volcan Mountain, and Alamo. And so really, they tend to be very impoverished, in part because they got that land just far from jobs, it's far from schools and universities, and there's a whole set of reasons why tribes or reservation land or sort of ejido or tribal lands in Latin America are complex in terms of what the socioeconomics are. You can't, for instance, get loans, and because you can't alienate the land, which is good, but it's also bad because you can't get loans, you can't do investments. It's a lot of complexities, but I would say the county does a lot, we do a lot of it is in relation to gaming. That's just the economic realities. So gaming tribes, non-gaming tribes, so it's the labor relations issues, land use related issues. The truth is, when you get involved in government, you shift from having like a very cultural focus to having a very concrete focus. I will a lot of tribes. And if you're interested in engaging in Umai, I can give you connections to folks at Verona or folks at Rincon or really any of the tribes that I can help connect to activists and organizers in those areas.
Bernie has great connections. Bobby Wallace.
Yeah.
Bobby Wallace is a great connection. Bobby's the best. Awesome, cool. Any other questions in person? There was some chat questions that I can answer that are more geared toward like department stuff. But anything else for our guests?
Yeah, it's like more about like the medical focused people. So like, do you find it hard to, because I know like one of the biggest aspects of the medical industry is like the financial aspect of it. Like, you know, is it cost effective? You know, how much is research? Can I get money from it and stuff like that? And like with anthropology, like a lot of it is like deconstructing systems and stuff like that, and like thinking about the human aspect. So do you find yourself conflicted a lot of times because like you have this anthropology degree where you're trying to help people and like, you know, create solutions for them, but also like you're in this industry where a lot of it is, you know, are you making enough money for certain stuff? Or is it, you know, not using too much money?
I can hit that one because I work in venture capital, right? And that's
Yeah.
about as nasty capitalistic as you can possibly get. Like that is the black hat people. So if you want to change something, if you want to make something better, people have to be able to afford it. Like you have to come up with some way that you can actually practically make it happen. And I think that's sort of when you shift from being just a pure academic to someone that's actually trying to enact change. So if you look back at sort of when I was working on these critically ill kids that had rare genetic diseases that were gonna die in 3 or 4 days if we didn't figure out what was wrong with them, we had a $12,000 test. And so no insurance company is going to approve a $12,000 test without getting prior authorization, because they're going to say, that's a really expensive test. You have to come to us and we will approve it. And we said, if we wait for you to approve it, the kid will be dead. So what we had to do is we had to go in and basically say, look, this is going to save you money. Like just letting us do this test, we're going to diagnose 1/3 of the kids. And the healthcare savings that you're going to get by us diagnosing that third of kids 2 weeks earlier than they would have otherwise been diagnosed, it's going to save you money in the long run. And being able to do that work where you went through and you say, this is the health economics of how we utilize our resources. We got it to be a covered benefit by Medi-Cal. So we were able to basically show the benefit of what we do. And so cost benefit analysis when you work in healthcare is all about access. Like if you care about access, if you want people to actually be able to live their best, healthiest lives, you have to be able to prove a room full of skeptics that they can afford to do it. And then you can make amazing things happen. Then you can make amazing things happen. But in order to do that, in order to be able to convince people, you have to have a seat at the table and you have to be in the room. And that's sort of the balance that exists in there. Like, what is the change that you care about and how are you going to make that happen and how are you going to convince people that it's actually possible? So.
I think at a lower level, I think making sure people can come to clinic and just not charging them or just seeing them, literally giving them my cell phone number and then checking in with them that way, because maybe they're undocumented and they can't come to clinic. So they had all these interventions done in the hospital and that was covered by Medi-Cal restricted. But now we did all these things to them and now they can't follow up anywhere. I mean, there are community clinics, there's a lot of those, but those are really inundated. So, you know, I think I'll probably never have a seat at that table, but every little thing that I can do for at least 1 or 2 people a month, I feel at least I'm helping a little bit. And it's, you know, it helps them, and I feel like maybe I'm making a difference more. I mean, you'd be surprised what you come across day to day. I'm a blind patient who has to take insulin. And why is that pharmacist even giving them an insulin bottle and a syringe? They can't see it.
Yeah.
Like these types of things. And then I have to call and fight with them on the phone to get them talking pill bottles or braille pill bottles. Like those are the kinds of idiotic things that you will deal with that Doctor A, B, and C, or provider A, B, and C, you didn't even think of. And I'm not saying I'm so great, like I thought of it or I did it, that's not it. But I think being on the outside of that bell curve, you are gonna think about things like that and you're gonna get stuff done for people. And that's important too.
Any other questions? Yes, we can have this be our last question. You guys don't mind? Yeah.
Yeah, this one might be more for Dr. Apartments or can all open for all. How do you keep yourself intellectual flexible? It's we have the people from all kinds of backgrounds like oceanography, chemistry, physics. How do you overcome the fear of stepping into a new industry, new studies, while you're feeling comfortable? Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm kind of forgiving and forgetting all the things I've done past, and I'm going to start a new life or starting a new career in a new industry. So I'm personally a filmmaker major. Many of my friends here who major in anthropology. I think this studies or this conference will be very helpful today. So I'll come, but I never know what I'm going to do next. So maybe being a filmmaker, maybe in anthropology. So how do you overcome the fear?
So my experience has been among people that are really successful in life, 10% of the people are total arrogant bastards. And then 90% of the people live with constant imposter complex. And you live with constant imposter complex where you think that like when you're a medical student, you're standing around, the attending physician will ask a question and someone will immediately answer that question. And 9 medical students will be standing around thinking, oh my God, I'm the only person here who didn't know the answer to that question. And I think that imposter complex is real, it's normal. Normalize it, live with it, and then enjoy learning. And then enjoy learning the other things. And being, I mean, I said in the beginning of my talk, I'm constantly overwhelmed with the amount of things that I don't know. And that's never gonna get better. Like that's just never gonna get better. But it's fun to learn. It's fun to go out and see new things and learn about something new and read papers and go down a rabbit hole every once in a while and be like, you know what, I really want to understand, like, I'm going to try and cook a meal like the Romans ate. Like they didn't have pasta. What did they eat? What did Roman people eat? Like, I don't know. I'm going to go find a cookbook, go down that rabbit hole and learn it. And I think that being okay with not knowing stuff and then asking people for help and figuring out how to do it is, at least that's what works for me, because everybody that I know that is really successful lives with constant imposter complex.
Maybe what that looks like, at least while you're in school, if you're like, I'm just thinking in the bowl, how that's applicable to me, is to take classes that maybe like just out of your reach, may stretch your thinking. I'm taking a class right now that like I already know it's already beginning to stretch my thinking. And like, yeah, it can be like, those can be like the instances where you practice at keeping yourself intellectually flexible.
I would also say there's a socioeconomic, ethnic and racial component to this thing, which is like, you know, part of it's, we go into these environments every day, like I'll be at the board of supervisors meeting, it's like, oh my God, this person pontificating about vaccines, they have no idea about vaccines. Why are they pontificating? It's like 9 out of 10 some white people, you know? It's like, there is like a certain privilege of being like an affluent white male, or being an affluent white woman, I mean, Lord knows, that are very, like, that's a level of confidence of like, it's kind of galling where you're like, oh my God, why am I up here? I don't know. I mean, I even have some experience, but when somebody comes to me and says, oh yeah, we want you to do this, like, yeah, obviously, yeah, okay, I'll go do this. But that's because from when I was a little kid, all my teachers had me like, oh yeah, you're the like white male in this room, like you get to talk, like we want to hear your opinion, blah blah blah. So I mean, I think Bob was right. There is an imposter complex, but it is not evenly distributed in social space. It's distributed in gendered ways, in ethnic ways, in racial ways, in class ways. So part of what I would say is like, it's audacious for me to propose it, but I think in a certain sense, like, have the confidence of a affluent white male, just like,
Or even mediocre white.
or
male.
yeah, like middle class white male. You know, that distribution is like, there is no. I have so many. We have staff members who are young women of color, and they're quiet. And I go, do you know this shit? I know this climate action plan for you know it. You're in a room with people who don't know it, and you fucking know it. You know. So in a way, like, go back to your level of knowledge to overcome this imposter syndrome. Go back to it and say, you know what? Look back at my life. I know this material. I know the material. I have proven to myself that I have been successful in charting out new things. I have great heuristics that are applicable throughout multiple fields. I walk in, I know it. Believe in yourself and submit the lack of faith to evidence, and you're going to find, like, actually, I was pretty good in all these circumstances, you know?
All right, this is the last quick question. Cody, what is the name of the disability advocate you were speaking of?
Umberto Burmilan. His phone number is.
You can contact Cody on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. Let's see, is there any other quick ones? Anthro Club, do you guys, Discord link? Is that something that we can get posted
What
on the
is Discord?
website?
Holy moly, kids.
It's like a TikTok.
Yeah. If you use Slack, it's like
It's
that.
like Slack, yeah.
Yeah, it's Slack, but just more
It's Slack,
social.
but for gamers and fun things,
Yeah.
yeah, right?
Yeah, didn't you? Yeah, you just mentioned nerdy stuff. I was like, wait, what?
That's so funny. Yeah, okay, cool. So for the Discord link, to the student that asked about that, I will get that posted on the website,
Yeah.
on the Anthropology Club page. Also, this recording will be posted on the career page of our website at some point when I get to it, which will hopefully be next week. I will try to get it up by next week is my goal. I will send you guys, I'll shoot you an email, letting you know. But yeah, I wanted to, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording if I can find my mouse at some somewhere. Let's see, there she is. Perfect. Stop recording.